Welcome to the Hope on the Hard Road podcast, where you and your family can find community, find encouragement, and find hope for the road ahead.
Surround yourself with a body of believers that can encourage and support you. So that doesn't always look like those with disabilities, but be proactive about that, getting plugged into a church community, into a group of people that can see you and can help carry.
We're talking today with Andy and Laura Gibson, co-founders of Certain Hope Community, a nonprofit bringing hope and support to families located in Michigan. Andy and Laura have 4 children, and their youngest daughter, Briella, was born with a rare chromosome disorder that came with a long list of diagnoses and challenges. Because of the day-to-day challenges they experience as a family, they noticed the need for community and found Certain Hope Community. We loved our time sharing with this dynamic duo, and we know you'll love their story too. So let's get started and listen in to the conversation we had with Andy and Laura Gibson.
Well, hi, Andy and Laura. We're so glad you came on here to be a part of our podcast today.
Thanks so much for having us. We're excited to be able to chat with you guys for a few minutes.
Yeah, you bet.
Yeah, so why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, your family, how you guys met, and then kind of what took you along your journey with having kids and then disability.
Yeah, so we met in college. Actually, is an interesting thing. I was playing college soccer, and I had this injury at the time. And so I wasn't like in my peak performance when it came to talking to Laura, but I did have this eye patch. I almost had a detached retina, the ball hit me right in the eye, and I just had surgery and came back. And then that was like the moment Laura was like, I like this guy.
Yeah.
It's so funny. So yeah, that's how we met. She saw the eye patch, couldn't resist, and just went from there.
Yeah.
Had to think we're pirates, huh?
Not at all. So then we've been married now 17 years, I think, or 18.
Let's go 18.
18.
Yeah.
And we have 4 kids. So we started having kids about 3 years into marriage, which was actually, we wanted to wait 5 years. 3 years was a little quick. We felt like we wanted to do all this traveling, but it's been such a blessing. So we have 4 not little ones anymore. Axel, who's 15, Riker, who is 13, Briley, who's 11, and then Briella, who is 9. So it's been a wild ride these last 15 years.
So now we live in Michigan in a town called Grand Rapids. And so we've been here about just about 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
Love it. Oh my goodness, you guys, that's so great. It's so beautiful to hear your story. I love it. We met in college as well, college sweethearts. So that is so fun. I love it. I love it. Just looking back, and I know it's been a little bit, but looking back at those early years when your daughter was diagnosed, what were those early years like for you guys?
Briella is diagnosed with a rare chromosome duplication called trisomy 4P. So there's no other kiddos like her in the world, but with that comes like a long list of other diagnoses. And I think for me, the first 5 years, I always say we felt like we were drowning. Like it just felt like everything that could go wrong went wrong with the first 5 years. And it was after 5 years, I'm like, I feel like there's some light, which it's crazy because we had 3 kids before and knew about raising kids and loved parenting. And then Briella, with all of her medical diagnosis, came along, and all of a sudden parenting was hard. Like there was hard moments with our other 3, but it was like, it's a season, it's going to end, and just treasuring the little moments. But this was like, it was really hard for me because I'd always had such joy in parenting. And it was the first time that it was like really hard and having to choose joy every day.
Yeah, I think for me, I went into, I don't know, I guess you could call it like man mode, like your typical, like, I'm fine, nothing's wrong. I'm just going to do everything, and I'm never going to get tired, and I'm never going to, shed a tear. I'm just going to be just the superhero that this family needs. And then, as you guys are well aware, and I'm sure most of your audience, it's like, you can do that, but it is a very short run that you get, and then it just comes crashing down. So I think for me, for the early I'm like, this is fine. We'll do this. We're just going to went into this like crazy mode that just was so unrealistic in so many ways.
Yeah. Oh man. I am so happy you guys brought up the fact that as spouses, we don't often handle it the same way. We
Mhm.
often grieve differently. And I think it's important for families to know that, our couples to know that. So thanks for bringing that up.
And to be prepared for that, because
Mhm.
sometimes I know like the whole grieving thing and being able to come to grips, all of a sudden you're like, what is this like overwhelming burden you feel and you don't know what to do with it. But if you're aware of like a grieving cycle that, oh, there are stages in life that, with your child, especially a disability, that they're not going to have certain milestones, certain things that they're going to do like your typical child, you're going to grieve those things. It's going to come upon you. And if you're not prepared for it, then you're like, where'd this come from? Where if you're prepared, you're like, okay, that's what it is. And you can at least put a name to it so that you can like respond and kind of move forward with it. It's definitely something that we talk to a lot of families about. If we're talking to couples, definitely you just mentioned the being on a different trajectory, where they're at, like yourself, Andy. I was just like, okay, let's just hit the ground running. Here it is, and hit her much in a different way than it hit me. And then it's like at other times in our life, it's
Yeah.
it's hitting me, and she's moving along and doing just fine. Which it's when you're both actually feeling it at the same time, it's the most challenging.
Burnout factor is so real. So that's another great thing to bring up is that um it's okay if you can't do it all.
The
I mean,
self
we
care
all get
idea.
to that point, right?
Mhm.
And so
Yeah.
yeah, just realizing that.
Well, and then we're also looking at other siblings, and you have three older kids.
Yeah.
Based on what you shared. So with a family of all that, it affects not just us as a couple, but also the kids. Do you have any advice, like well, maybe explain how that impacted your children along the way, and any advice that you might have to parents as they're raising maybe atypical kids?
Yeah, I don't think it's a good thing to sugarcoat it. Like that is one of the most difficult things
Yeah.
that I mean, you can't prepare for. You
Mhm.
are surprised by it. Like we didn't spend a real long time in the NICU. It was about 2 weeks, but we're both there with our daughter. And then there's three other kids home, and like Laura didn't leave for a while. I would go back, and it was like I remember driving back, and it's like, okay, I need to like prepare myself. I need to get ready. It's like another, like you're entering another world,
Yeah.
and only going to be there for a little bit. And they want their mom and dad so much. They don't know because they were younger. They're not trying to understand like why are mom and dads leaving so much, and where has mom been, and how come I don't get to see my new sister as much as we got to see the other ones. And it's a hard thing. I remember those were the conversations back and forth from the hospital that I had with God. I'm like, God, we need to talk. Like this is not what I'm wanting to do. So let's figure out something. And we would go back and forth, but it's hard. And it's still tough because like even today we were just sharing with you,
Mhm.
our daughter got sick, and immediately that triggers, okay, we have to start thinking about this. We have to start thinking about, well, are we both going to go? Does one of us stay? And then what are our other kids going to do? One's at work. Who's going to get him? Like it's just all these things start rolling. Yeah,
I think it's super tricky when they're younger. Like we had Axel, I think was almost going to be 6 when she was born, our oldest, and then 4, and then almost 2. And so trying to balance that is super tricky. And I think we got some really good advice from a pediatrician actually when our second child was born about like pulling out special treats for when you're working with your child. And it's not actually a special treat. It's like a goldfish becomes now a special treat that's only brought out. So we
Yes.
really so thankful for that advice like years before, because Briella took a lot of our time. And so we would do things like that, pull out like a treat when we're doing treatments for her or different things like that. And then when we'd come home from the hospital, we had lots of hospital stays with her. We'd always have something for them that was little. Maybe it's a pack of gum or it's something like that, trying to make a positive environment or something positive out of it.
But it was like, hey, Briella wanted you to have this while she was
Yeah.
gone.
And yeah, so trying to find those little moments to like sneak away, or even a lot of our moments with them that we're now one-on-one. brought Briella along because she couldn't be with anyone else, but trying to make those moments still, I think, were huge. And then also we had another counselor tell us about, we were always like, how do we explain Briella? Because they don't need to know her in depth right now. They're so little. And she told us to write Briella out in like a 2 to 3 line story, like a storybook cover. And it was like, Briella's my sister. We love her. And she has, can't even remember. We used to have it all memorized and say it all the time. Like, she has a chromosome duplication, which means it's harder for her to do things, but she's a lot of joy, you know? And so then it was like this thing that when people asked about her, it wasn't a weird, like, I don't know what to tell them, kind of a thing. So that was like huge, I think, for us. And then the last thing is like, are really committed that our kids are the siblings and we are the caretaker of Briella. So we do not ask them to do anything with Briella. I mean, not that they won't have to run and grab a diaper every once in a while, you know, when it's like no one else is around, because someone had given me a book. It was actually the worst book when Briella was born. That was like about being a sibling to a child with disability, and they were the caregiver all the time. And to spin that, it was like actually really opened my eyes that like, okay, this can be even more traumatic for these children. And this is my burden and Andy's burden to carry. It's theirs too, because this is their sibling. But I feel like it really fostered is they have this desire to want to help their sister now. Like, they all want to suction her or ask to feed her, or, you know, different things like that, that is interesting to watch as parents, because we want that to be their sister, not the caretaker. Not that there's not moments in life that they're going to have to. But yeah, so that's, I think,
I really like it how deliberate you are, you know, not what you mentioned, just it's like, you don't want them to be resentful. You want them to do it out of the nature of their own heart. And then something, Andy, you mentioned earlier, you know, in a marriage, when you're faced with disability, there is a moment of reckoning, like, okay, the way we thought we're going into this is now going to change. And like literally spending time with God and trying to say, okay, where is that? I know we came to a place where, you know, I had to change. I was teaching and coaching took a lot of time, and that was not going to work anymore for our family. And then that teamwork aspect that has come out, I think every good marriage that we're talking and encouraging these, that aspect of teamwork and figuring out, you know, new systems to put in place as you reckon and kind of get over the grief of having a child with disability and moving forward. Yeah.
Yeah. And I just love hearing how you are just caring for the hearts of your children. And you mentioned one of them now is old enough to have a job. You know, is it looking a little different as they're getting older, you know?
Yeah, it's very interesting as they get older.
They've been exposed to a lot. Let's just say that. I don't know how to go into detail, but now it's like changing too, where it's like they're like, Briella's a lot older, our sons are a lot older. So now like all the things that they used to just be like, would be fine and we do in the living room or whatever. Like all the mechanics
as they get older.
All the mechanics of that are changing too.
I think he's speaking like privacy. Briella is mobile and still wears like a diaper. And so before, when they were little, it was just, she was right in there with them, right? Other ones were in diapers. And now it's like they, you know, you can't come in when we're changing or doing things like that, to give her own privacy as well. But it is a little interesting. But it's been interesting watching how having a sister like Briella has developed their character in ways that we could have never done. They see people and notice things, which is just like, I think it's so beautiful, sometimes heartbreaking, because they see the heartache when parents are raising kids that are similar to Briella. You know, we run a nonprofit that gets families raising kids with disabilities together, but they see these families and see these kids. And it also translates into like the work environment. They just are more detail oriented. I think they had to be by nature, because so often Briella would have seizures or breathing episodes. And if they're in the room with her, they are like, just all of us, like naturally attuned, like something's off with her and, you know, like calling us to get it. But it's made them be these kids that are naturally observant, that I don't think would have ever happened had it not been. It kind of was forced upon them. And it's been cool to watch.
Yeah. Yeah. It absolutely develops that empathy in our kids to a higher capacity than anyone else, or than even ourselves, right? Because we didn't grow up that way either.
Well, they kind of end up giving them the ability to develop on their own, and not forcing it upon them. They own their own role of being a brother or sister, which is awesome. And you kind of see that taking place. I know our son really owns the role now of being a big brother, and that's a beautiful thing that you watch them own it, be protective, see how they can help, and then help people outside of our own family too.
Yeah, yeah. Now, you guys, I love that you're so open about the medical needs, because that is what we're talking about today. This is our medical series, and we want to have um, the reality of what you guys go through be talked about. And so, we're just sitting here thinking, I mean, you guys have probably been through so many medical emergencies and hospital stays and things like that. There's a lot of stress with that. How do you guys deal with that as a family, as parents? And do you have any advice for other families that are going through it?
I would say a couple things come to my mind right away. Is we are connected to faith community. We are plugged into a small group at our church, and that's really like the number one thing that comes to my mind is having that connection. But then we're always learning different methods and different things to do, because there's a lot of stress. Well, one thing I do is I just try and go for a run a couple times a week. It doesn't take long to wear myself out. So like 3 minutes later, I'm already back home, ready to.
I think that's a worse way to.
Yeah, Laura's not into that. Laura does.
Works good for him.
But I've found that it's hard for me to sometimes just be gone for so long.
Yeah.
And so I found that running kind of does both things. It helps my mental game, and I'm able to be gone for a half hour and be back and just breathe again, and it just works for me. What about for you?
I think the ongoing medical stuff, one thing is being okay to getting help, to like accepting help from friends and family when someone offers something, to just saying, yes, I would love that. Can we bring a meal by? Can we do, and even if you have food in the fridge, it's one less thing you have to think about. So that's been huge. Realizing that the emergency doesn't end when you're back from the hospital. Those that are in it know that, but like allowing and extending yourself that grace too, that like when you get back home, it's when you come down off this crazy, emergency high. I don't know if you call it a high, but that it's a recovery process, and you're shorter with your kids, you're exhausted. And so like extending yourself some grace and letting things go a little bit has been huge for that. And talking through too, like allowing that space of like, that was really scary. Like when you're in the emergency, you don't allow yourself, at least we don't, maybe some people are better at this. You just push through, right? Like you're listening, what are they saying? Let's get the facts. Let's do all this. And then afterwards, allowing yourself that time to like grieve. Like those are hard moments. And every moment we go into the hospital with her, we're praying that we get to come out, but we don't know what that looks like. And is she going to come out the same way that she went in? What all does that look like? And grieving that and allowing that space for our kids. Cause I think we think kids are resilient, but they also have that need too, to allow themselves to grieve and say, that was really scary. There were so many times when Briella was, especially the first 5 years, where they would wake up and we would be gone in the hospital with her because all of a sudden she would destat. We'd be racing there, and they'd wake up to someone else in the home. They woke up
the
to like
entire fire department. And
so it's been a lot of that. So I think getting in the word, I think acknowledging, I would go for walks around this field that we had by our house and just talk to the Lord out loud and just be like, this is so hard, and allow myself to like fully grieve all those moments, that it's not a one and done, as you guys know, like you mentioned earlier, it's a continual grieving process. That's okay. That doesn't mean you're not in reality. That just means like you're dealing with this next one, because we were not designed to have, the sickness and all this different stuff we deal with. That's not how God created this world. And so it's uncomfortable and it's not natural. That's another thing. We're big counselors. I'm Christian counseling.
Just hearing you talk about processing the trauma, that is so beautiful. I mean, that's one of the things that, trauma counselors will talk to you about is walking through what just happened and we made it out the other side. And that literally helps your brain to be able to process it and put it someplace healthy, because you are under so much stress all the time. that flight or fight response kicks in. And like you said, it's not, you don't have time to say, how do I feel about this? No, it's an emergency, right? And so
Yeah.
afterwards, that processing of it, that was beautifully said. And I
Yes.
think our families really need to hear that. That's beautiful. And also counseling. Same here. We often
Strong believer in
encourage that.
counseling.
So I think that's wonderful that you guys brought that up.
Well, and so
It's
much,
such a help.
well, and so much for counseling. People think counseling, oh, your marriage must not be good. But when you're dealing with things, and you have two willing people that go into counseling, and I say this all the time, like it's amazing how much progress you can make.
Okay.
We're not at odds with each other. We're best friends, but there is stuff that's come into our life that we didn't wish, and it wasn't a matter of bad decisions that you have to deal with and figure out how are you gonna, take the next steps? How are you gonna work together? How do you even think? It's like taking the time to process. You just kind of hit action mode. And you don't even know how your brain is processing some of the stuff some of the time, and it's really just it can be quite overwhelming. And looking on this kind of piggybacking, you guys said, counseling is something that you put into your life to help process stuff. What other kind of things do you do for, say, self-care and also to invest in your marriage?
This is a tough one, but we try and make date nights somewhat of a priority. That has always looked different in the different, like moving over to, we recently in the last 2 years have moved, so that's looked different than what it did before. But trying to make that a priority.
Yeah, it's been really in the last few years that we've been able to do that, like leave her with someone. But we used to, before she was born, we would do date nights at home because Andy was a pastor, so there wasn't much money, and finding a babysitter would be, it's always tricky whether you have, our kids just make it a little bit more complex now that Briella's here. So we would do date night at home. Well, then when Briella was born, it got super crazy because she would need you all like throughout the night. It was like I would stay up till 5 a.m. Andy would get up at 5 a.m. and take over. So it was really tricky trying to figure that out. So a lot of times it looked like going for walks with each other too, and redefining what a date night looked like, because it doesn't always look like it's away from her, right? Like I think when you put it in that category of like that, then it's always going to fail you. Like I always bring the analogy to like Mother's Day. I used to think Mother's Day was like, you just relax and you don't do anything. And I would end up disappointed because there would be dishes left in the sink or something. And I just had a perspective shift of like, that's not what it's about. It's about spending time with my family. It's not this day off. And Mother's Day is great now. So same thing with date nights. Like it looks a little bit different, but we'll do walks together.
A lot of walking. We used to have, she made me sell this, but we used to have a tandem. And that was the best. Like a tandem bicycle. If you want free marriage counseling, just ride a tandem bike together down the street in public, and it's amazing what comes out. But we used to ride that through the subdivision at our old house, and I would just scream, "We're in love!" And she would. And but it was like we do things where you just like laugh at each other, and definitely try and get outside. That's always been our
Sometimes saying no to like filling your schedule with friendships, even though you're missing those, making sure your family is fed first and then the friendships, because we love being around people. You guys, it sounds like do too. So you can understand that it's so easy to be like, we never get to see them, but then it's like, we never see each other. So, and finding time to make like intimacy a priority, which is so tricky, right? But then figuring that out, it looks so different now, but that's, I think, a huge thing within marriage. That's a big priority.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Well, I love all that because, like you said, it looks different. And I'm glad you elaborated on that. Having a minivan and being able to have her in the back seat is a big deal.
Yeah.
You go and like there's a movie that she's watching, and now we can actually have a conversation and know that you don't have to wrestle her because she has a 4-point harness. And we have like an adult jogger stroller, and so you talk about getting outside and having conversation while you're pushing the stroller around. Those have been huge things, and it doesn't look like no one be like, that's your date night, but yes, it is. Those types of things that you can put in where those seasons we all go through them where you don't have the respite and you're missing those types of things, but you have to connect. When the kids start going to school too, is don't be afraid to take the day off to reconnect. That has been a huge thing. I think that you go through a long season of a lot of trial, a lot of hospital visits and things like that, and then you have an opportunity like, well, we just haven't connected to you know they're in school, that's free respite, if you would, and then being
Yeah.
able to take the opportunity to have a lunch date or get out of town or do something, for several hours where you can connect because your marriage is the heart of everything else you do. So
Yeah, absolutely.
I love that you said the school and the iPad too. We had a family that was coming to our worship night and she said, it's really hard for my son. I'm like, does he do well with an iPad?
Yeah.
Have him watch the iPad because this worship night's for you. It's for you to connect. Don't feel guilty about the iPad because that's like the best time to use it is when you can connect too. And then school is a huge time to take those lunch breaks, and do them together.
mhm,
Yes.
definitely.
Oh, so good, you guys. Also, there's just so many, again, like medical interventions all the time that complicate the way that life kind of plays out. How do you guys find you do vacations as a family? How's it affected like your routines and your calendar and, holidays and things like that, right?
It's super
Yeah, that's a tricky one.
it's tricky because Briella's needs can go from like nothing to like everything very quickly. So we had a scenario that just happened last fall, I think it was,
Yeah.
where we planned a trip out to Vermont. I've been to Vermont in the fall and I wanted the family to experience Vermont in the fall and everyone was healthy. We got in the car, we drove 7 hours, spent the night, made it all the way to Vermont at a
The
gas
gas
station
station was,
closest
like,
to our Airbnb.
10 minutes away.
Yeah, and she seemed kind of off, like something was weird about her. So I like took her temperature and it was high. And then we plugged in her pulse ox and she was needing oxygen. And for that trip, I had brought only like 2 or 3 oxygen tanks. I can't remember how many it was, and a concentrator. Or I didn't bring it. I can't remember exactly. Now my memory's getting foggy with that area, but we knew like we have to turn around and go home because this is going to put us in a scenario that we're going to be in the hospital. There's not enough oxygen in here to like for the level she was needing.
Yeah.
That was that tough decision where you just look at each other and you're like, this is what we have to do.
Yes.
We need to do it now. So it's not, a helicopter ride.
Yes.
Mhm.
And we're in the middle of nowhere, and I just started crying, and I was like, oh, this is so hard. And saying that to the kids, we're so sorry. We have to turn around, and they're understandable, but some of them were crying too. And, we tried on the way back, like, look, we get to see some of the color. We get a little bit there. And we drove right back. The cool thing about that in the sense of like, we had oxygen tanks that should have run out and God just kept the oxygen tanks running like hours after that they were supposed to be empty. So that's a cool memory for the kids to look back on. But
holidays, Laura's gone to family stuff with the other kids and I've pulled back, vice versa. And it's just never normal. It's never how it should be. It's always like, and with Briella, she could be fine. Like, yeah, we'll be there for lunch tomorrow. Well, when she wakes up, if she's needing oxygen, like our life comes to a screeching halt and everything changes and plans change. And that's hard because not a lot of people can really understand how that's it. What do you mean? What do you mean? You just yesterday you're going to be there. And so actually like beyond the difficulty of her medical stuff, it also creates some difficulty with the relational side of families and holidays and all that and vacations and stuff. So,
which I don't know if you guys have felt that. I feel like sometimes those closest to you think they understand. And I think they try to, but then there's situations because of her medical complexities that can seem so back and forth. But, depending on what her day is like, it's like, we can't do that because something could happen, and we feel comfortable doing that. We don't feel next week because she already had an emergency this week. It's so tricky. And I think I never understood that until we were in those shoes, that nothing is permanent. So I find myself like not talking about things before we go. Like the kids will know we have a trip, but friends will be like, we had no idea you had one. I'm like, cause it's probably not going to happen. Like that's in the back of my head is like, and it's just one of those things. I think last year was the first year we were actually all together for every family function, like at extended families and things. But yeah, there's been multiple family trips where we both left to head to Ann Arbor with her. Grandparent brought him back and things like that.
When you go through these things, that moment in time where you realize, okay, it did not go as typical or as at all planned, but look at this tiny little thing that we can hold on to and say, God was in it. God was with us. And your kids are seeing that. And those around you are seeing that, even if they're not quite tuned into it. it's just living life in such a different way. And
Mhm.
it's not something we all would have chosen, but it's definitely a whole other perspective shift, as you said earlier. I just think that's beautiful.
Well, not everyone's going to get it either.
Yeah.
And like you said, you feel like you're letting down people, but we didn't choose this.
Mhm.
It's not a character situation that these things took place. Our kids have needs, and unfortunately, part of the plan is that we end up canceling many times, and we have to regroup and go a different direction. And if you don't have a child like this, it's you don't realize all the things that really might seem like it has to revolve on families like ours, but it's just what you have to do to even make family work.
Mhm.
Um, and so probably, I mean, this is a great segue into you guys founded Hope Community, and I'm sure that had something to do with bringing people together that do understand it and feel the same way as you guys do, and have experienced some of the things and that kind of community feel. Can you talk about what started Hope Community, how you guys got started, and kind of what's your mission?
It's actually called Certain Hope Community.
Love it.
Okay.
It's all good. We realize that there's so much isolation in this world of disabilities, and for us, there was two things that worked really well: hope and community. And so we thought if we can, man, if we can give some families some hope, and not just any hope, like a certain hope,
Yeah.
certain hope that is in Jesus, that he makes promises, he keeps promises. We can count on his word. It's so good. And that certain hope, because we're surrounded by uncertainty.
Mhm.
The moment we found out about Briella, we were buried in uncertainty.
Yeah.
They told us the best thing to do would be have an abortion. And they said, it's late, but we can still work around that. And there's just like, you're from the beginning, you're surrounded in this uncertainty. And so we want to give people some certainty. And the only thing that we know is Jesus. And so he has the final say in everything we do. And so, and then this power of community is huge. So we try and get families together, and we want them to connect with other families. We want the siblings to connect with other siblings who get it, who have a sister or a brother that's not the typical, and they can talk. And it's been really amazing to see how God's brought this all together.
Yeah.
How he has.
We, we were talking earlier before the podcast was on how God's plans are always way different, or a lot of times a lot different than we have in mind. And it was 2019. So Briella was born in 2015. It was December of 2019, which when did you guys start? Wasn't it right around
October 2019? Yeah.
Because that's what I was remembering too, that it was, so I'm always curious what God's doing with this movement from us, these 2019 organizations, and right around that year. And he was just like, made it very clear that he wanted us to get these families raising kids with disabilities out into creation. So Andy was a associate pastor at the time, and we're like, okay, let's just try it and see. And we had put in a couple events, and every event we did had something go wrong with it. Like the first was a fishing event, storm. Like the second event, we had the hottest day in Michigan, I think ever, in power outages, like all over. The
Great.
third event, trying to remember what happened, but then it was like the fourth event.
It was a mess.
Yeah, but people still came to the fishing event. We had to cancel an event because our kids with all their medical complexities, we couldn't do it. But just like watching him stay faithful through it all, and how he continued to bring families. And then it was in 2021, it was like God wanted us to do it full time. And it was just kind of a total shift on what we had been thinking. And we thought Andy was going to be the head pastor at the church. Our pastor was retiring. That was kind of the trajectory that was thinking with everyone in the church of leadership. And it was just a big shift, but we totally see what he was leading us up to, that those years in ministry have just been tools that we've used as we are with these families. It's a part of ministry that we loved the most. Like loving on families is, you guys do it. It's the coolest thing ever. You feel like this is amazing. We get to just have all these families in and connect them.
And there's something cool about a family who has a child with disabilities. It's different. Like there's no like they just say it as it is. And they're not like, I'm not doing okay. And this is why.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we really appreciate that because there's some heavy things. Like when we get done hosting an event and you're talking to these families and you're hearing about their joys and the things that they struggle with, we come home and it's like, yeah, we're physically tired, but also it's like, whoa, did you like, there's stuff going on. And it's cool that God's inviting us into that to be able to speak some hope into those situations because it's so needed.
And to watch the families just, we're big on just like you guys helping marriages too, and making the whole family unit to be a strong unit. And it's been interesting to see the siblings connect as like a sibling is taking another friend's kid in a wheelchair around like a roller skating rink or at a farm. And it's like, we want our kids so badly to be seen. When someone sees your daughter, like you guys really, it is like monumental. Like I forever will remember moments when people actually see her and like acknowledge her. And then to watch the siblings do it to each other's siblings, it's like, wow, like this is mind blowing.
Like when someone comes up to our daughter and she's in a wheelchair and gets down to her level and maybe put their hand on her shoulder and engage her like that. We remember that.
Yes.
The most, it's like, okay, I see her, like, that's good.
That's amazing.
Yeah. And what you mentioned is something I've experienced a lot too, especially with dads. And I've been, a teacher, coach, and in a lot of different circles with men, but this group, life's beating them up a little bit. The transparency, they feel a part of each other. They're like, everybody's on board with helping each other. It's just something transparent and encouraging and real that, a lot of society is missing. And it's really been a blessing to be a part of that. And then when the families get together, you can be your real family. You don't try to hide it. You don't try to mask it or try to avoid what's going to go wrong. It's going to go wrong. And then you have a group there that they're all having things that quote unquote go wrong. And the level of acceptance is just huge. And sharing that with you guys is really awesome. Talk to us about, some of the things that are going on right now when you're doing this with the family journey.
You guys recently, I think, got a grant for an accessible bathroom that it was like a trailer.
So we actually didn't even get a grant for that. That was fully funded by just people, friends and family from in certain Hope community families, which was mind blowing.
We did a post on Facebook and said, this is what we're wanting to do. And this is why. I mean, if you have been in the disability world for 4 seconds, bathrooms are the biggest that you've ever experienced on every possible level. And so 9 days later, we had $25,000 for this trailer. So we went and bought a brand new trailer and totally redid it, made it fully accessible as best as we possibly could. And it's got a huge change. It's a V-neck. So like the whole front of the trailer is an adult size changing table that can hold anyone. It's got a dry flush toilet, so we don't have to mess with all that. It's air conditioning. It's got running water. I mean, it's really exciting. So we can take that to all of our events if we need it. And
then we also like lend it out to organizations that want it for different things because we want it to be a blessing. We want people to have like the accessibility of it. So we've had the joy of being able to lend it out. But we do on the horizon, we have some mom and dad events coming up, some family events. We did a worship night this summer. We'll do another one or two. I'm trying to remember what's on the calendar that we have. So we have a lot of different exciting things.
We just did did you say this?
We did a date night, which you guys that's like your specialty. I feel like you guys really master that. And so we did a date night and it was a huge success. We were really nervous about would families be able to come, would they be able to find childcare, and hearing them talk like we have a sitter for the first time or we haven't been out in 2 years, and like to be able to provide a space for them to connect and to do it.
So we tried to go all out for them because we know like, man, they're trusting us with their date night. Like things just got real. Like
We actually do it at a local farm of a family that had 3 kids with disabilities pass away, a strong Christian couple, and they have lent us this farm for free, which is amazing. And also are all hands on. And they had a couple of the girls stay back, or the girls asked to, of the farm, and they let the families do some like riding on the horses, which it's always cool to like give experiences that you wouldn't normally get. Cause in order to do that, you would have like had to find a babysitter, paid for it, like organized it, and it would have never happened. So that was also another little surprise that we weren't planning on, but that got to happen.
That is awesome. Bravo, you guys. Seriously, that is just beautiful.
Well, and to see a different community of people come together and like you say, these experiences, like when things can be spontaneous for our families, usually spontaneity goes in a negative direction, but when it goes in a positive direction, man, that's really something to celebrate. Maybe do you have any like stories that you'd really like to tell about how, certain hope has impacted some of these families?
Yeah.
I've obviously talked to a lot of families, but recently, we had been with a family that was pretty new to our group, and I was just talking to the dad for a while and just asking him questions about their journey, because they are newer in it, and they said, "You've been doing this for so long," which kind of triggered me, like, hey, I'm not. You just
You're old.
The age difference here, but I remember he had sent a message and said that was like one of the best conversations I've had, in a long time. And when we first started, we had a mom who was really in a hard spot, and just so many things were making her life difficult. Two kids with disabilities, a marriage that was not great.
Yeah.
And she had called, and we prayed with her. We tried to encourage her, and then come to find out, we had recommended a church for her to go to, and they went to the church and they got connected. The kids are in the programs, and so you get exciting things like that where it's like, man, I don't know what the outcome would have been for this family if they didn't hear about this church, because we're always trying to point people. Yep. Like, you need to know this. This is by you. Try this church. They do a good job with this situation, and so it's really encouraging. But you don't always get to hear the stories, right? We're trusting that God's using this, and then I'm talking a lot, but I get excited about this. We these worship nights, and I don't know if you have heard this statistic. Families that have disability are the largest unchurched people group in the world right now.
I believe it.
Absolutely.
You see it.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many reasons why, and so we just had our first one this year, and this family's like, we haven't been to church in I don't know how long, and it's just nice to be there, to hear, like, we just read through a psalm, we sang some worship music, obviously, and she's like, it's just great. And then, like, you got people saying, my kid ran off screaming, and no one looked. Like, it wasn't real. It's just part of how it is. And so I just get excited that these families are coming out, and their situation doesn't change, right? Like, there doesn't necessarily make it easier, but there's hope being spoken into their life a little bit by little bit. And it's not just us. It's because of our consistency. Now you're having other families speak into their life and be encouraged. And it's just a really cool thing to be a part of.
And I think the one thing that I've seen in the moms that we that are within the Certain Hope community is the chance to be able to see families that have like gone through it and going through hard times, and watching, like, okay, the questions you're asking, like, where does your hope come from? What do you do for stressful situations? How does that work? What does it look like for your marriage? Oh, this is hard on your marriage too. Okay, what have you guys done? What counselor do you go to? And just sharing of that advice and of what it's looked like, even navigating within churches of, with kids, like, how did you do that? And making families more open to even attending a church maybe they attended previously before their child and are not any longer, but then they get the encouragement from these other families because it's like, okay, I can do this. And just watching that, because I think we often forget that other people are going through this hard. When you're in it so deep, it's like, this is so hard. You can't see beyond because you're so focused on everything that you have going on, especially as it gets more and more complex. But then listening to other people's stories and walking alongside them and knowing that other people did it too, and getting the advice, like, what can I do to be better? Or what can we do to make this stronger? Because it's not going away. There's no like fix it. Right. But it's like getting those tools from one another has been like super encouraging for the moms, and watching the transformation in the lives of like these moms, just like the encouragement and the attitude towards their marriage and their other kids is like, there's no way to measure that. We always say that. Maybe you say that within your community, like, how do you measure all this? It's like immeasurable things, but you can see the good that's happening.
Oh, absolutely. It's quality of life, right?
Well,
It's thriving, not just surviving. It's beautiful.
well, and sometimes like the ability for us to video some of the events and to watch, I mean, a person's joy in their smile and so forth, like they haven't been to an event like that or been able to have a date night or so forth, and you can just see it, and that the video can actually show and tell a story, and just what you're talking about is so cool. All the community stuff, and then they build it, they build confidence, and then they're also better to advocate for each other and advocate in churches and advocate for in the educational system or wherever it might be with each other. There's this power in the community working together.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and advocating for marriages. I think, you guys are very passionate about that too. Just it's amazing to watch these couples interact and encourage that towards one another. That like, this is hard. Like, we know that we're better together.
It's hard from day one. You get like two sinners get married and then decide what could possibly go wrong. Yeah. Right. Like
exactly. Exactly.
This other stuff. It's tough.
Yes.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And if you're working through God's design, that challenge is really a beautiful thing to draw you closer, and then that's where you guys play your part. And then we're trying to do our part, is that if you can have that lens as a husband and as a wife and as a couple and as a family, that you can see that it actually is a catalyst to bring you together and build you stronger and build teamwork and do all these things. And really, I mean, it's marriage in God's image, and that's why he allows it, and he's working through it. It's such a beautiful thing to watch and encourage these families to see that. So we're really blessed to see that you guys are doing that, and we've been able to experience some of that as well.
Yeah, I love it. There's one thing we always love to ask our guests, and that is, what's one thing you would share to help bring hope for the road ahead?
I would say surround yourself with a body of believers that can encourage and support you. So that doesn't always look like those with disabilities, but be proactive about that, getting plugged into a church community, into a group of people that can see you and can help carry, because we're often families that take a lot. And so finding someone in a group that can support you, just because you need that to be able to go.
Yeah. Your help comes from the Lord. And it's so easy in this world to go many different routes to find your help or to find a way to just get through, this next day or this hour. But your help comes from the Lord. It's very clear in the Bible in Psalm 121 that he cares about us. He sees us when we leave. He sees us when we come back. He's our protector. And so as difficult as it may be, and this is just coming from an ex-pastor and a 2-time seminary dropout. Your help comes from the Lord. And so if you can lean into that and trust that, I think it is an amazing source of hope.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. See, I think his provision, like that's such a big thing, knowing being seen by him. We were just talking about that today. Like so often you're not seen by people, but knowing that like being seen by him is like the biggest thing.
Absolutely. Oh boy, you guys, this has been amazing. We are so excited to share out what you guys are doing up there in Michigan.
Mm-hmm.
Certain Hope community, you guys, check them out, and all the things will be in the show notes. But you guys, this has just been a blessing to us, as much as we hope it was for you guys. Just hearing your story, connecting as a couple to another couple going through a lot and finding that hope on the hard road. So thanks for coming on.
We love what you guys are doing and are excited for you guys and what's going to be happening in the years to come.
Love it.
Thank you, guys.
Check out the show notes to find resources and contact information for today's episode.
Yeah, and if you like the podcast, please share it with others and be sure to follow us so you won't miss an episode.
We love to hear from our listeners, so leave us a comment or rating and connect with us on social media or on our website at hopeonthehardroad.org.